So before we start, just a quick overview, and I'm sure you've been hearing some of these numbers already, but it's important to highlight them again, that 40% of the global wealth is actually held by women. Women are expected to control over $216 trillion in wealth globally. 30 trillion is expected to shift from baby boomers to younger women by 2030 in the United States alone. So women make up 47% of the world's labor force, nearly 40% of the entrepreneurs around the world. Right? So the female economy as an addressable market for fintechs, and even more specifically wealth techs, is actually huge. But to talk about the gaps, I mean, in general, in financial services, only 65% women have a bank account compared to 72% men. There's over $1.7 trillion of unmet demand for credit among female-focused micro SMEs in developing markets. And from the latest research by the Alliance about gender intelligent fintech design, how fintechs can capture the female economy, that has just been released today, the gender gap is actually 3 times greater than other gender gaps when it comes to the use of fintechs. Women are 27.6% less likely to access fintech products and services. So what we think is gender neutral product design, the impact of that on the overall sales funnel is quite clear. And also, as part of the latest research, the really interesting statistic is that by increasing their female conversion rates to levels equal to male conversion rates across the sales funnel, the report estimates that fintechs could see up to a 70% increase in revenue. So there's a lot of money being left on the table by fintechs by not taking a gender intelligent approach to their sales funnel, right? And overall, there's been a 60% increase in the use of digital investment platforms in 2020. Our focus for today's panel is specifically wealth tech, these digital investment platforms, and to actually tease out specific ways in which wealth tech solutions can be and should be designed to attract and engage more female customers in wealth tech and increase their loyalty. So with that, we'd love to get started, and I'd love for the panel to introduce themselves, tell us a bit more about you, your companies, and if you can highlight a little bit about the gender composition of your customer bases, and any reason why you think that is, if it's high, low, right? And also if there's any specific targets for the female economy in your organizations and the rationale behind that as well. So I guess maybe Jennifer, if we can start with you.
Sure, great. It's fantastic to be here. So I'm Jennifer Mcdonald. I was Chief Operating Officer at Mocha Financial Technologies, which is a leading saving and investing app in Canada and also in France, where we launched last year. Mocha is focused on the mission of helping people to achieve their financial goals by automating saving and investing. And we had a successful exit a couple of months ago, and we were acquired by Mogo, which is another Canadian fintech. It's a publicly traded company. So what drew me to Mocha when I joined was that they were already gender disaggregating a lot of their information. They were publishing an annual report. They were curious about what were the patterns for women who were investing on the platform, and what were some of the takeaways from that, and how did you build that into the product. Prior to joining Mocha, I spent several years working with Women's World Banking, which is focused on that issue of how do you close the gender gap in terms of access to financial services. And I had several years of working on developing mobile savings products for women and addressing some of those barriers. So I was very glad to see that there were fintechs that were tackling that issue. I really feel that the wealth industry could not have done a better job of alienating women and failing to address their needs. And I was really interested in how do you take the opportunity that we have with fintech to disrupt the market and to do something different that changes the balance. And so in Mocha, we have in Canada, we had achieved about 40% gender participation, which is, to the best of our knowledge, about 50% above what most wealth techs are able to achieve. And when we launched in France, we were happy to see that we actually got beyond gender parity. We had 53% of women that were on the platform. So clearly, we made some improvements between our first country launch and our second. Looking forward to talking more about it.
Yeah. Great. That's awesome to hear, actually. 40 and 55%, I mean, those are really great statistics, actually. Stella, if you want to go next.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here today. I'm Stella Melarano, and maybe, as you can notice from my accent, I'm from Brazil. And well, I started off my career as a trainee in a very prestigious investment banking in Brazil. And when I started off as a young economist, this was the only path I could see as a career option. And I didn't realize at the time all the other opportunities there were. And after a few years working in that, I just realized that these big financial industries, they're not interested in disrupting. They will never be a catalyst of change. They will never do things differently, and they will never give opportunities to, for example, women, or they would never put this into an actual initiative. So I quickly realized that, and that's why I fell in love with the startup world. Because when you look at startups, how they are disrupting and creating solutions that they're creating solutions for problems that maybe were outlooked before. So problems that were status quo and people would never think about changing them. This is how I see startups and how they are shifting the world. And that is what drew me to Fintwell. Fintwell is a fintech, of course, and we offer a simple and 100% online investment platform where we charge low commissions and low commissions, and it's a very easy way and seamless to do all the investment process. We work with optimized portfolios, and from our 70,000 clients, 40% are women, and we manage for $640 million today. We started off in Chile, and we were selected to join Y Combinator. We were the first startup in Chile to be accelerated through Y Combinator, and we recently opened up in Mexico. Just this year, we received all the regulatory paperwork. So we were the first startup regulated in Chile and the first independent investor advisor in Mexico to open up. And when we start to look into gender, for us, of course, the target would be to have be equal between both sectors. Unfortunately, we are still not there. So 40% of women. And it's really sad too, when you look into it and you see how much money each of the people invest, we see that women invest in average 20% less than men. So this is something really big and really strong for us. A few reasons why we believe this is happening. First, it's known men's wages are internationally higher than women, so women have less money to spare and to invest. When we look into Fintwell's data, men have been investing for a longer time than women. So when they've been with us for a couple of months more than women. So they, since our clients invest monthly, this draws a little bit. And in Mexico, something really interesting happens. I don't know if maybe, as Jennifer was saying, it's our second country. We did a couple of things better maybe, and and when you look at the amount of women of money that women invest in Mexico, it's 25% higher than men. So this is something really interesting, and maybe when we look down the funnel, we can deep dive into this.
We'd love to unpack that further, actually. Yeah, those are very interesting numbers again. Thank you, Stella. And Viola.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Greetings from Maryland, East Coast of the United States. My name is Viola Llewellyn. I'm the co-founder and president of Avamba Solutions, Inc. We are a trade tech innovator that has pivoted and danced our way through to our current model over the last 8 years. My business partner, Marvin Cole, and I created the company to drive financial inclusion on the African continent. And today we really do tend to talk in terms of emerging markets, not just the African continent, having started partnerships with groups who service the MENA region and the Islamic region. One of the things that is distinctly different about us and has given us an opportunity is being an Islamic trade finance innovator. We spent the first part of our existence doing a very deep beta test. But for the African continent, numbers, data, and facts are not always as available or reliable or as easy to confirm. So our situation is very different from what you might experience and understand. First of all, we tend not to think in terms of gender in our market for our sector. And I don't know whether that's because there are elements of perceived survivalist behavior. The second thing is majority of the businesses who come to our platform to apply for capital for importing goods and buying inventory are actually women, but they're not noted as that. That's often because we find that although a man is applying for the capital or is running the business, the person who's actually making the business successful and making money is frequently a woman, number one. Number two, there are a lot more business women in Africa than the World Bank and other well-intended groups will portray. So we tend not to think in terms of gender because all day long we're looking at women doing business. The problem is they're not being counted correctly. So you start to get into economic GDP errors when the efforts of women are not calculated correctly so that you can apply policy development to them. So now Ovamba is beginning to pay attention to this. We are beginning to collect this data now that we're partnering with credit bureaus and other groups to see what exactly is going on in the African reality as it relates to trade. We're very specific, we're quite niche, but that niche is large. So that's a little bit about us, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the panel.
Great, thank you so much. So yeah, I mean, let's dive deeper into this whole funnel, the sales funnel. And I mean, just to highlight for everyone, basically, you know, the overall marketing and sales funnel is right from creating awareness to actually moving into the consideration phase where a customer, once they're aware of your product, you know, they decide whether or not, how do they consider it further, when they finally approved into your system, and then moving on to usage and usage patterns, and then moving on to loyalty and referral, right? So we'll try and unpack each of these, you know, as in the course of this conversation, and try and dive into specific examples, what worked, what didn't work. So it leaves our audience with really actionable insights and as to what they can do in their respective organizations as well. And for the audience, if you have questions, if you can leave that in the Slido chat, we'll try and like pick it up where it's relevant during the course of the conversation as well. And hopefully, if we're not able to get to it, you know, now, then we'll try and get to it at the end as well. So with that, I guess let's start with awareness, right? Like, how do we actually, you know, how have you, all of you in your organizations, you know, gone about creating awareness specifically, you know, for the women's segment, right? Are there specific marketing strategies, whether it's digital strategies or, you know, your offline organic strategies? And I mean, in the report that the Alliance has just released as well, there's specific blockages in the funnel also that they've highlighted. Things like, you know, which a lot of us would know of, that women don't find themselves, there's no relatable content. We don't see ourselves in the advertising being put forward by businesses, right? Or, you know, lots of other reasons as well. So I'd love to start with, you know, just unpacking a little bit of that. And what are some strategies which you think worked? And Jennifer, as you highlighted, right, like you've seen it across 2 markets at Mocha. So we'd love to start with that, right? I mean, and especially maybe if you can also highlight what worked better in France versus, you know, in Canada. We would love for you to start.
Great, thanks, Yosha. So definitely, I think the point that you made there about how women don't necessarily see themselves in the messages that are being put forward. So I think that's something that's really critical. Is you know, typically a fintech app, as you're you know, putting your message out there about what your core value proposition is, you know, you're going to be telling some stories about how people use your product, and being able to feature women and stories that resonate with women is really critical there. So, you know, there was some content that Mocha put out early on that was quite effective, showing, you know, a young woman going through the early stages of her setting up her financial life. And it tells a story, you know, from, you know, the transactions that she was making, the way that was, you know, driving automated savings, because Mocha is a roundup app. So, you know, which type of purchases was she making? How were those contributing towards the financial goals that she had? And then going through some milestones around her 30th birthday and you know, some other things that she was saving for. So telling women's stories about their financial goals is something that works well. I think the other aspect is you know, continuing to work on your value proposition and making sure that as you're launching new features, then those are the ones that are going to resonate. We saw that there were, as we were developing the sort of next generation of features, that there were certain things that really resonated strongly with women, because we were doing our research in a gender disaggregated way. For example, we saw about a 10-point difference between women and men in terms of interest in socially responsible investment. So while in Canada, we offered it as a feature, as an option, and we had, you know, very high take up of it. It's about 65% of our users that would be using that feature in Canada. when we went to France, we decided to make that the default option, and so that we don't offer any investment portfolios in France that aren't socially responsible. So that's in keeping with the times. It's in line with the appetites of a young French consumer. But I think even more importantly, it's something that really resonates with women. So going out with a value proposition and the types of features that speak to her is also critical. There's one other aspect that I'll highlight in terms of this funnel. So, Mocha, like many fintech apps, was really reliant on performance marketing and media spend. So, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok advertising and so on. To do that kind of work, it's a very data-driven type of business, right? You're constantly watching what your conversion rate is, what your click-through rate is, what's the cost of acquisition for your users. And as setting targets for what percentage of spend you're looking to put for specific demographics actually makes a difference.
Yeah.
So at Mocha, we had the goal of having equal spend on both men and women. And sometimes in the search for those efficiencies with media spend, we actually had our performance marketing agency coming back to us and saying, you know what, if we reduce the focus on women, we will actually get to a cheaper CAC, because the messaging that you're using is not converting as well for women, and that's a decision point as a company. Are you going to iterate on the messaging so it attracts the users and the segments that you're targeting and you achieve your target goal, or are you going to take the shortcut and reduce the focus on women in order to maintain your CAC at a certain level? So we consistently sort of drove the agencies to meet our targets, and worked on getting the messaging and the product right so that it would work for women.
I love that. That's such an important point that you raised, Jennifer, right? That that you actually had this goal that you'll keep the spends equal for all men and women as a demographic, right? Because you're right. I mean, especially in the early stages of startups, I think it's something that we do tend to take shortcuts, right? That if the early adopters are men, let's just market more to men. And I've made that mistake. Like, I've run a cashback startup before this in India. We had over 1 million users, and our early adopters were men, so we made that mistake. We just kept marketing more to them, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that now you think that your product is basically a product which men prefer more, right? So it's really important, like you mentioned, to stick to that goal and keep iterating the messaging to make sure that the CAC can be maintained across both segments. Yeah,
and it's down to really fundamentally the belief that the business case is there for serving the women's market, right? So you're doing it because it makes good business sense, even if sometimes you're going to have there's some areas where you're going to have to be just a little bit smarter to make it work.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, thank you for highlighting that. So yeah, Stella, if you want to tell us what's worked in Mexico and now in Chile and now in Mexico.
Sure, glad to follow on. In Fintual, we have, I'd say we have, when we talk about awareness, we have an internal view and an external view. The first of all is the internal view, because we don't believe that a product designed by men can attract women. If we want to attract women, we have to have a product designed by not necessarily exclusively women, but we need women to think about it and to design it and to know how to communicate this. So this is the first thing. We put a really big focus in having a 50-50 team, 50% women, and especially a 50-50 tech team, because tech is the heart of our company, and it's really hard. It's hard to hire developers. It's even harder to hire women developers. So we put a really big focus on this. So we do recruiting campaigns specifically for women, and this is we once gave out like MacBooks for people that referred women if their referees stayed, for example. So we are being really creative to try to attract them. This is the first thing. Second, still looking internally, some actions we do, for example, focus on equal pay between genders, hiring an external consultant to be sure this is equal and competitive throughout the market. Parental leave is also something that we talk about a lot. So we brought up both in Chile and in Mexico. Legally, we should give only 5 days for men, but we brought this up to 3 months, and we make them take this time off because this is important. And lastly, the communication. So we refer ourselves inside the company as female. So when we're talking about ourselves, in Spanish, we have to use the preposition, and we always use it in the female voice. So this is a small thing, but it kind of brings the idea and reminds ourselves always to talk about female. And now looking to the external side, once we have all this team that's almost 50% women, we are right now 46% women, and our tech team is 32% women. Our team does a really strong job communicating this. So in the month of March, for example, we did a whole month focused exclusively on women communication. So we talked about really different sorts of materials. Since why do we need a Women's Day, or I don't know, how to empower the next generations of women, and things that are tangible in the financial market, not directly related to this, but in a way to communicate to them and bring them and make them closer to us and to the financial market and to FinTwell. Second, we always have a best practice to choose women as our spokesperson. For example, in FinTwell, we have 4 founders that are men, but today I am here today speaking in this panel, which makes much more sense than having a male. And also we have a really strong client referral program, that is clients bring clients. And it's really, really interesting because when we talk about awareness, from all the clients that come into our company, 50% of them through this channel, 50% are women. So that means that women are much more interested, or they trust, or they are keener to accept and to join and to leap in when they receive a friend's suggestion. So we believe all these actions, both internally and externally, they give food for thought, and they connect us with other women to build a woman's product for women as well.
All right, no, that's great. I love that. And I think one thing that really stood out to me was that the voice you have for the organization is a female voice. I really like that. Yeah, that really, stood out to me. So thank you for mentioning that. Viola, I know you mentioned that you're surrounded by women, so that's not something you sort of constantly think about, but would love to know if specific strategies for attracting more women business owners. I mean, what's worked?
Well, I'm listening to my colleagues on the panel, and the first thing that struck me is you're describing a part of the world where you've got very comprehensive rules that everybody's following, and developed economies that those are not the realities for us. So even the idea that we go out to attract women doesn't compute, because we don't work in the micro size, we're in small and medium. And when you get to small and medium, the women are slightly different, but with the same desires and intentions to access financial services. So if we are talking about Ovamba in the early stages, it was impossible not to attract women. We offer a product that is not bank-based. It makes it perfectly possible for anybody, even in places where, for example, the printing industry in Cameroon, if you're not a man, you cannot sign a contract for your book to be printed. Crazy. So you have to go and bring some dude to come and sign a piece of paper about stuff you wrote on paper, which is ridiculous. I actually spoke to a woman like that. All of this came out after the fact, but the first thing that we noticed with our product is we're offering a Sharia murabaha, basically, to go and buy things on behalf of somebody else. That gives women an advantage from the get-go. They don't have to have the money immediately. In that part of GDP flow, the further down you get into the pyramid, where your hands are closer to the ground to make things before it goes upstream, you're going to have more women anyway. You just do. By the time you get to the top and everything becomes industrialized, mechanized, where you've got more control over pricing, there's more men. So being an alternative trade solution, we find many in our portfolio are women looking to buy something so they can sell it. They are either running an informal business that is structured formally, or they truly are informal. And for us, informal means that there is not a determined rhyme or reason for what they're buying and selling. They also show up seasonally at different times. So we see the data very differently from the rest of the world. But it's impossible for us to think in terms of what are we going to do to attract more women, because the women that come onto our platform grow very quickly. Classic example is the fact that our solution is a product called Bank Partner that banks can license to use our algorithms and our risk models. It really embed culture, tribal data, and information about Africans the way we really are when others are not looking at us. Not the post-colonial version that makes us look as almost as squeaky clean as everybody else. So it's very, very different. But with Bank Partner, we have women who were always ordering maybe 2 containers of goods every 6 months. That's because they can't manage cash flow, because access to financial services through the banks are a little bit harder. We also noticed that the very first stumbling block, the further down the pyramid you go, all the sexy of fintech is great, but if you cannot read and write a post-colonial language, you're not going to get any of it. So we had to create a natural language chatbot in people's dialects and languages so that you can speak. If you're a woman who's maybe not had a chance to go to formal schooling, you're not going to go in and complete all those forms at the bank. Take, for example, the first customer we ever got, August the 12th, 2014, couldn't get a loan because they said she was a scientist. She's a pharmacist, for crying out loud. So the female inclusion into financial services sometimes has got nothing to do with whether a woman wants the money or not. It's the ecosystem around her, which will continue to perpetuate these blockages as most systems try to self-sustain. Take Black Lives Matter, take any type of institutional racism. It will continue to invent its livelihood, regardless of what's going on around the society. Within emerging markets, the same thing happens. Even if women continue to climb the economic ladder, unfortunately, if the leadership stays majority male, just as you guys said, the products and services and the opportunity and access to opportunity will continue to accidentally get managed. So we created our products so that it's not subject to that. We don't do banking and we don't do lending. So therefore, you can't interfere with this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I like the fact that, your product itself was filling a gap, which was primarily, something that was needed by women. So yeah, it's sort of, by its very nature, it attracted more women, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the one other big learning as well, that if you're filling a gap, which is specifically, targeted at women, it will automatically attract women as customers as well. Great. So that's, just, sorry?
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that was the sort of, how do we attract women as customers, and some really important points highlighted there that, I mean, right from an internal view, right leadership, designing the product well, filling the gaps in the market in terms of the product, but then making sure that, when you're spending money on marketing, make sure that, there's targets there, which are equally divided across demographics, right? So great. And I mean, we've created the awareness. Now, now let's come to the sort of considerations phase, and specifically like the whole idea of gender intelligent product design, and specifically onboarding within that, right? Like there's a lot of research and in the Alliance's research report as well, that during that onboarding phase is where there are more drop-offs for women, right? And that's when in the funnel, the cost of acquiring a female user actually might end up being high at the end, because while just acquiring them in the beginning, getting them to sign up, maybe not as expensive, but just sort of attracting their attention, maybe getting them to click might not be as expensive, but then getting them to sign up, complete the whole onboarding process might be more complicated, right? So are there specific things you've done, in your experience, which have led to where you saw maybe that there were actually issues where women were dropping off more, and hence you kind of changed the flow a little bit, added a few things, I don't know, maybe a chatbot like Viola mentioned, right? Where different languages, which, actually otherwise, people wouldn't be able to understand, or, more digital support, more sort of, simpler language. What is it? Some examples of, whether you saw that actually happening, and when you saw that, how you might have changed things. So I guess maybe this time we'll start with Stella, and you can also tell us, like you highlighted, like there were differences between Chile and Mexico. So, would love to know what you saw and what you changed.
Certainly, yeah. We have a really big difference between the two countries, and it's in the onboarding process specifically, there's a really big factor that's the regulation. So in Chile, what do we have? Our clients have a real seamless 3 minutes onboarding. They upload documents. They're instantly approved or to start investing with us. They do their first transaction. Yeah, enough. That's it. So from becoming a user to becoming a client, it's really easy and fast. In fact, only 19% of our clients in Chile ask for help in their first month. So 81% of the clients do all the investing on their own. When it comes to Mexico, this gets really different. In Mexico, we needed a license to do our digital onboarding. So before this digital onboarding license, we had to get physical signatures and a piece of paper for every single client. So before we got this authorization, we were only onboarding friends and family and just something really, really lean and easy, because it was such a big process, such a big job. It took us 6 months to have this license. And when we finally got this license to do the digital onboarding, that means that instead of having a physical signature, we can do it by video. It doesn't mean that the client can do it on his own. So it's still a very not so seamless process in Mexico. And what do? We have the FinTwall team is connected from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if the client says, okay, I'm ready, I want to go through this verification, we are connected. Someone just jumps in a call, but it's a video call. The person has to answer a couple of regulatory questions. They have to show their identity for us to compare with their faces. I mean, it's really easy. It can be super easy, as in like 3 minutes, you're done with it. But some people don't want to jump in a call, and this stage, we see that the conversions get really different between women and men. 7%, it's women drop off 7% more than men in this phase of the funnel. So, I mean, we do a really big job communicating with our clients, and in fact, this video call is in fact a communication with our clients. But what we do realize is that sometimes we are it's direct or too much of this communications. Sometimes this can cause mistrust or the perception of too much commitment, or why the hell are they asking me these things? Like, why do I need to do a FaceTime with someone online? And this is why they drop off, or they are uncomfortable with these technologies too. But it's something that really calls our attention. Unfortunately, it's a regulatory issue. And even though we're working on the process, there are some things that we have to comply.
Yeah. So you feel like if they didn't have to get in, so it's actually at this video calling stage that more women are dropping off, because it feels like too much commitment and just, maybe it makes sense. Okay. So if this regulation was changed, this difference would disappear. Okay. Interesting. Jennifer, I know you also mentioned, some examples of how differences between France and Canada, and how things were simplified in France, and hence you saw, the adoption rate has been higher there as well. Would love to know more.
Yeah, definitely. And I see that we have a question in the stream there about relationship management and how to manage that from a Wealthtech perspective. So I think I can answer both your question and that one with this response. So as a digital product, we like FinTwall, really work to make sure that it was as seamless as possible. But inevitably, there, sometimes people have an issue or something pops up, and what we've seen is that consistently, wherever there's something that can be a pain point or a barrier for a user, that women are more likely to react to it than men. So if something doesn't go the way you expect it, then that's where you have those drop-offs. So right from the beginning, we made a really strong effort to ensure that there was access to a friendly, upbeat human in the app, so that whatever issues you had, you could get them addressed quickly. You could get a response through the app from our friendly customer success team. And over time, we built a really world-class team that was able to handle questions very quickly and get them resolved. So it's that, how does the human factor come into the technology experience to be able to help to increase the trust and make sure that people can get their questions answered and addressed as quickly as possible. So that's something that we manage very closely. We built the team out over time. We automated part of it with the chatbot integration as well. to make sure that people could get answers quickly and that you're focusing your human interaction on the highest value and most important questions. So focusing on that aspect of trust and being able to get help when you need it.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, and I guess, yeah, that answers the question around relationship management as well. Viola, I guess actually we're running, this conversation's been so interesting that we're not even going to like be able to get through the entire funnel. We literally have the last 2 minutes late.
Yeah, I know that we have to wrap up, so I'll make my comment very brief. As a female founder, as a co-founder, I am constantly looking at the impact to humans on the digital innovations that we create. And one of the things that I am particularly interested in, especially for women, is creating a continued improvement in the psychological respect and aspect for generating and accessing wealth. It's one thing to access it. It's one thing to have the right to get to it, but how do we help women get really comfortable with building wealth, keeping it and transferring it? So everything in the product innovation stream that we do is always with a very, very long-term review of so what? And for us, the so what is the Small Business Association for Africa that gives women the ability to have their lives looked at from a 360 degree versus just I'm working, I've got 24 hours to work. There's got to be more to life for women, and that's the focus.
Thank you so much. And I guess, yeah, with that, thank you so much, all of you. I hope it left all the attendees with actionable insights on how do you think through this funnel, and the most important one of which being that look at your data from a gender lens, start gender disaggregating your data. When you do that, you will start seeing a lot of things which you wouldn't even have thought, and a lot of myths and, preconceived notions that you might have had about the women's economy would be busted actually then. And that's when you can start to look at this whole funnel and start optimizing at every stage of the funnel. And getting women to manage their money can have a transformative impact on, not just your organization, but the world. And I hope that all of us can start making some small changes in our own organizations. Thank you so much for a lovely conversation, Jennifer, Viola, and Stella.
It was a pleasure. Thanks everyone.
So
All right.
Thank
bye.
you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.